do you want with me?
You will be haunted by 3 spirits. I'd rather not. I am the ghost of Christmas past.
Haunt me no longer!
What if you were given a second chance to get your life right? This holiday season, the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future
Get away! Get away!
will give one man that chance.
Humbug.
Disney's A Christmas Carol.
Happy December. Welcome to the Christmas Carol, but certainly HTAsiaLink style. So as you can see, it's going to be the real-world evidence carol. Now, you can also see how hard we try to make this work, so please do stay with us. Today, not just one man, but all of us are going on the journey together. A real-world evidence journey, or real-world evidence carol. We are going to be meeting with, don't worry, no spirits here. It's going to be weird. We are going to be meeting with 3 experts, okay? 3 experts who will share with us their knowledge, experience about the past of real-world evidence, the current exciting use of real-world evidence, including what is yet to come for real-world evidence. And we also have a special appearance with a very special presentation from a policy perspective or insight on the use of real-world evidence. Now, each speaker is going to have about 10 minutes to deliver the presentation, which will then be followed by an open Q&A. Now, we like to hear from you, and we know we've been very active on Hoover, so thank you. At the same time, we are all here today, so I would like to also encourage you, if you have questions, do send to Hoover. Under the plenary too, there's a Q&A part, but at the same time, there are microphones all around. So please make your way to ask the question, or you'll be surprised. If you put your hand up, a microphone may appear. So with that, without further ado, allow me to introduce you to the first speaker. Professor Erna, who is the head of the Division of Pharmacoepidemiology at the University of Gajah Mada in Indonesia, with many contributions to the society. She is also the vice chairwoman of the National List of Essential Medicine Committee, including a member of the National Committee on HTA. To share with us lessons from the past, strengths and pitfalls of RWE, please join me to welcome Professor Erna.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First, I would like to thank the organizing committee to inviting me and Professor Mardiati that who gave me recommendation to organizing committee. I will present the topic entitled Strength and Pitfall of Real-World Evidence and Lesson from the Past. if you look at the process of the randomized control trial for one active compound, we need around 15 years from preclinical study, phase 1 clinical trial, phase 2, and phase 3. After that, give the license from regulatory body. And after have the license and go to the population, international population, the efficacy or safety in the population not as the same as from clinical trial because so many factors influence this. For example, variation in the population, differing age group, race, ethnicity, gender, unstudied comorbid condition, differing concomitant drug, lifestyle, smoking, dietary habit, differences in disease severity, and varying level of compliance of the patient. We ask, is there an efficacy effectiveness gap? We know that the observed discrepancy between effect of health intervention in routine clinical practice as compared with the effect demonstrated in randomized control trial, it's like maybe the efficacy lower or the risk to adverse event higher. And why is the real-world data and real-world evidence is an issue? Because RCT is only short-term, and we need to extrapolate long-term safety and efficacy. And in RCT, we have efficacy, but we need to know about model effectiveness. And in the population, we have many kind of medicine that have the same indication, so we must assess and decide on the relative effectiveness. What are real-world data and where do they come from? Real-world data can come from a number of sources. For example, electronic health record, claim and billing activities, product and disease registry, patient generating data, and you know about the application in mobile devices now. And this is the definition of real data and real-world evidence by various regulatory agencies. For example, from US FDA, real-world data is the clinical evidence about the usage and potential benefit risk of a medical product reported by provider, payer, or patient. And real-world evidence is the clinical evidence about the usage and potential benefit risk of medical product derived from analysis of real-world data. And you know about the hierarchy of research evidence. And the highest is meta-analysis. After that, RCT, cohort, case control, and so on. This is the observational study. And if we look at the RCT versus real-world evidence, in the left side, we have safety and clinical efficacy versus effectiveness in the real world from ideal and control setting versus real world setting in basic practices, several thousand patients versus up to million of patients. And in the left side, we need randomization to reducing bias and confounding, and versus generalizable study finding, patient journey and outcome, clinical effectiveness evidence, and faster patient access to innovation. And this is the differences about the perspective and need from different stakeholders. From pharma, they need to look at evaluate efficacy to improve patient outcome, and from regulator, identifying the detect safety signal. For payer, you know about the cost effectiveness, and provider, local relevant evidence, and for patient, they always ask which treatment is safer and affordable. The opportunity of real-world data can conduct in development phase, authorization phase, or post-authorization phase. And the example is validation of surrogate endpoint, identification of target population, understanding current clinical care practices, use of historical control for rare diseases, making drug utilization, and understanding potential knowledge of gaps. We know about the history and real-world data from Dr. Craven around 1950. He made the study, observational study in the large number of patients and gave the patient low-dose aspirin to prevent the head event. And the recommendation is to patient range for 45 until 65 years old and have the lifestyle, special lifestyle, and ironically, Dr. Craven don't get at the time don't get the aspirin low dose, and that in 75 years old with myocardial infarct. And others in US, they have the biggest South polio vaccine trial, include the around 600,000 versus 1 million children. And after Dr. Craven recommendation, in 2015, start the adaptable study, is online study and simple study. And the patient give low dose versus high dose, and the outcome measured at the long time. And this is from Sweden, antithrombotic therapy called bivalirudin. It's the trial from the Swedish Heart Registry. It's called the Validate Swedish Heart Trial versus heparin for STEMI and non-STEMI patient. And after that, the EMA adopt this trial. This is a SAPIEN 3 transcatheter head valve. The patient who went to intervention with SAPIEN 3 go to the SOFT 3 registry. This is the trial based on registry, and in Europe, and FDA expand use to SAPIEN 3.2. And the others is, example is in 2021, indication of tacrolimus to prevent organ rejection in adult and pediatric patients receiving lung transplantation is based on observational study. This is, please look at the challenge rather to us before make the application of real data, because we have gray area, blue area, and orange area. In the gray area, please look at organizational, because we must look at the quality and the availability of standard and coordination, making coordination, and good governance, good compliance, and consideration of the cost. In the orange area, we have the technological about the cybersecurity and complexity of the big data. And the blue area, the lack of people to know about awareness, trust, expertise, and bias. So, in conclusion, we must know that RCT has its own objective, reliable, and valid evidence, but in the real setting, only several parts of evidence work appropriately, others may not. And framework will include consideration of the following. First, whether the real-world data are fit for use. Second, whether the trial or study design used to generate real-world evidence can provide adequate scientific evidence. And the third, whether the study conduct meet regulatory requirements. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Erna. So now we see a little bit, just a quick recap about the past. We hear about the definition, we know how it all started, how real-world evidence can be used to fill the gap that RCT may have. We even hear some interesting history about the use of aspirin, including polio vaccine. Now, let's shift gear to be in present. So let's see some exciting work in the present. And to help us with that, we have Assistant Professor, We have Assistant Professor Wen Jie Chan from the National University of Singapore. Her research program aims to apply big data analytics to generate cutting-edge evidence to support personalized care of chronic diseases and to empower policy and clinical decision-making. On the topic of exciting use of RWE in research and policy, please help me welcome Dr. Wen Jie.
Thank you very much, Dr. Varudi, for the introduction, and thank you for thanks the organizing committee for this opportunity to present the exciting use of real-world evidence in research and policy. So, as you may be aware of, it takes usually 17 years to translate biomedical science into clinical use in the public. And in the past, there are usually two valleys of death. The first valley of death occurs when the knowledge cannot be translated from the lab to the bedside. And the second valley of death is what we are concerning about today. It is when the new health technology or intervention is already designed and available. But for some reason, it cannot be broadly adopted by the public and to bring public benefit. This is because usually, sometimes, we lack of critical evidence from real-world settings to inform policymakers and stakeholders about the medical need in the community and whether the new product is truly effective and how it will benefit the public under a constrained societal budget for healthcare. And that is what the real-world evidence does. It bridges the death valley between clinical knowledge and actual clinical practice and clinical adoption and practice. So, as Dr. Erna has introduced about the real-world data empowers researchers and stakeholders to investigate into the end product of health and healthcare. And compared to clinical trials and cohort studies, real-world evidence can do more, in particular to study the disease burden on a population level and the unmet health needs like the disease control, adherence, patient satisfaction, quality of life, as well as the cost and effectiveness of healthcare interventions and technologies in real world as compared to the heterogeneous usual care. And at the same time, it can be used to study the complex pattern of health services use that leads to the analysis of a disease trajectory and whether the care will escalate and at what point it can escalate, in particular in palliative care. And these data can be also used to develop personalized risk prediction tools to predict clinical risk and treatment effect. So it can bring universal benefits to stakeholders to help them prioritize their funding, research, and management of the disease. And it can promote personalized care by informing about the right timing and intervention to the right patient. So in the next 5 to 7 minutes, I would like to give you a few examples of real-world evidence use in research and how it can inform policy. And it can, from a broad population level, such as disease burden, economic cost of a disease and the trend, to like the individual journey of a disease and the clinical risk. So, as Professor Erna have already introduced about the health administrative data, which are the billed claims that an insurance company usually routinely collect from patients whenever they went to whenever they have a healthcare encounter. So these type of data provides rich source of data to understand the disease burden and the health services use. And a good example is the health administrative data from the British Columbia province of Canada, because Canada provides universal health care to its residents. So, and they started to collect data from a long time ago. And the health administrative data set of the BC province linked each patient's demographics and every episode of their hospitalization, outpatient visits, and even their prescribed like dispensation of their prescribed medications and community care all together, and for essentially everybody. And these data are associated with low missing values and good quality. So based on these data, I want to show you 2 examples of how it can be used to study the disease burden and also the disease trajectory. So in one of such study, I studied the incremental healthcare cost burden of COPD patients compared to non-COPD subjects. So I identified about 130 COPD patients from the BC administrative data set over like the 15-year period of time. And I matched each of the COPD patient to a non-COPD subject that existed in the data set, based on their demographics, societal status, comorbidities, and health services use. And I started follow them since the first day of their COPD diagnosis. And it was found that COPD patients, compared to a comparable population of non-COPD subjects, they will spend $5,200 more every year, and only 1/4 of the cost was directly related to COPD attributable healthcare use. And over half of the cost was because they have like a greater comorbidity burden. And when we dissect down the costs based on the diagnostic code associated with each healthcare encounter, we can see that in addition to COPD itself, COPD patients spend a lot on circulatory conditions and other respiratory conditions, digestive conditions, compared to a non-COPD subject. And the gray bar shows the overall cost, and the orange bar shows the hospitalization cost. So the hospitalizations of a lot of comorbidities and COPD itself is driving up the cost of COPD patients. And when and this type of information is informative to policymakers, they can roughly estimate the overall burden, cost burden of COPD patients in the community. And it's also informative to the clinical communities, global clinical communities, to see what are the major cost drivers of this disease. In addition, health administrative data, because it's centered around health services use, so we can digest the complex pattern of health services use and use this type of information to model or to project the trajectory of a disease. For instance, I identified over 13,000 patients with severe asthma in the BC administrative data. I followed them for 10 years, and every year, they all began with severe asthma. But every year, I categorized their severity of the condition based on the health services use, and also the drugs, the patterns of medication use. And I categorized the asthma severity into 4 levels, like mild asthma, moderate asthma, and severe asthma or death. And then I use a Markov model to estimate the future year's severity based on the past 3 years' severity. Based on that, I can plot the trajectory of a disease severity. As shown in this figure, the orange bar shows the proportion of patients who remain in severe asthma over time. At the first year, they all began with severe asthma, but in this population, after 10 years, 80% of them their symptoms are reverted into a milder, milder state. And also, I found that like comorbidities and lower socioeconomic status will lead to increased length of time that these patients stay in severe asthma state. And these severity states, they were associated with money because they were estimated from the health services use. So these are directly applicable to when researchers want to study a new health technologies cost effectiveness on severe asthma population. They can just see the trajectory and use the transition probabilities and the cost associated with the disease state. But apart from that, so we have seen that health administrative data can be used to study the health services pattern and cost. And apart from that, electronic health records that are routinely collected in different clinics, so-called the registry data, they can provide richer information about like the patient's clinical characteristics, like the biomarkers, lab test result, and they can do something more than the health administrative data. For instance, I have conducted a study on the International Severe Asthma Registry, which collects the clinical registry data, secondary care of over 12,000 severe asthma patients from 20 countries. And based on these data, I studied the impact of using biologics, the therapeutic antibodies, in patients with very severe asthma, who are highly dependent on the oral corticosteroid use. So I have identified the biologic users and non-users, and there are missing values, so I impute the missing values using a multiple imputation technique. But the biologic users and non-users, they're systematically different. They come from different countries with a different availability of biologics, and they have different biomarker level that they need to satisfy in order to be prescribed with biologics. So I perform propensity score matching to balance their characteristics. And I found that biologic users, they have like a 70% reduction in the exacerbation in the first year compared to non-biologic users. And this result can basically replicate what we currently find in clinical trials. So real-world data can provide good supplement to clinical trial data to support clinical decision-making. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to talk about the individualized risk prediction, but real-world data, it basically can be used to make individual risk prediction models, because it can improve the generalizability as compared to restricted clinical trials. So we have seen what real-world evidence can do. But we also see there are challenges, like the data quality. These data are not collected for study purpose. So people can be lost to follow-up. There are a lot of missing values. There are measurement error, data entry error, and misdiagnosis, because they are not for research purpose. And the causality is unclear because there's no study design. There could be unmeasured and measured confounders. The treated and the untreated person, they are very different. And there could be two-way causality, or your assumption on causality can be totally wrong. And the data may be inconsistently measured across settings, and there could be limited evidence. Although we can take we can take actions to control for that. We can control for the quality of data collection, impute missing data, use machine learning algorithms, or we can use quasi-experimental design advanced statistical techniques to derive causality. We can publish good practice guidelines, but at the end of the day, all these efforts cost money. Who's gonna collect this data and handle all these? And who's gonna pay for it? So I'm gonna leave this question to the next speaker, and thank you very much. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Wenjias. Very, very nice transition. But really, I think, so certainly it's a really important question that evidence costs money. But at the same time, we also seen example about how evidence can be used to save money as well. So We have seen example of how real-world evidence can help us take a peek into the future. And isn't that the goal of what we want? It is not to repeat the past, but to look into the future and think about how we can make it better. So to help us take a peek into the future, our next speaker needs no introduction in our network. She's one of the founding members of HTAsiaLink Network, a current director of the National Hepatitis C Program Office at the Ministry of Health and Welfare in Taiwan. She's also an adjunct assistant professor at the Taipei Medical University and Fujian Catholic University. She has done countless research to support health policy decision-making. To help us peek into the future on what is yet to come for the use of real-world evidence, please help me welcome Dr. Jasmine Pu.
Firstly, I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate. Thank you. You can read my mind. You can read my mind because I think I was thinking like I'm too short for this. I'd like to congratulate HTAP for this very successful. I mean, I know it's not finished yet, but it's already very successful annual meeting. I remember vividly for the first time I attend the HTAsiaLink annual meeting, and I'm so glad to see how it grows up to until today. But I also sort of not so thankful to Juan Rudy because when I was assigned to be the real-world evidence carol of the future, I didn't know it would look like this. I must have done something wrong. I mean, maybe with two of us have some issues, I don't know. But yes, I'm here to talk about what is yet to come regarding the real-world evidence. So I admit it, I didn't know, I didn't understand the whole story, so I did a little check, research on this. So this Christmas Carol Yet to Come is silent, and Scrooge is afraid of him, and unnerved by the way the ghost gestures with his hand. I think it must be, it points to his weakness, points to something he dearly fears, have his fears of death. So maybe something could be wrong with we handle with real-world evidence and then makes HTA fails. I would not say that. It was Christmas time, also Christmas time in 2014 that I was invited to a nice committee Way Day in England. So I heard a talk by EMA officers talk about they are starting to doing adaptive licensing approach that would influence the later decision both on regulatory side and of course on the reimbursement decision side. So I thought a lot about it. So when I came back to Taiwan and had this a talk regarding what I thought at that time, this was the exact items that I share with my colleagues in Taiwan, that I think because the time ahead, real-world evidence is around the corner, we should think about capacity and capability building, both regulatory and HTA bodies. And a lot of problems that we should start thinking about, or there could be messy in our daily job. And also, I did this talk maybe last year or early this year. I couldn't remember that clear. That in Asian context, I think where we are now is that real-world evidence, real-world data becomes buzzwords that we constantly talk. And also many new publication contains these buzzwords. There are some guidance and huge increase in the real world related market. I mean, the consulting company keep talking to the company, pharmaceutical company or device company about how important real world evidence is. But I'm not so sure about the policy impact, I mean, in this region. And I think there are still some resistance or not capable enough to do their own decisions based solely on real-world evidence. I'm here to be the real-world evidence carol of yet to come. So I must point out the weakness here, that I think what can possibly go wrong is when we're doing without paying enough attention. This is an example that my dear colleague Grace Wu has done. She had done this analysis years ago, and this based on our NHI claims data set. As you can see, this I didn't know how to point here. She used this claims data set to basically compares drug-eluting stents and bare metal stents. Of course, she made a systematic review that she learned the risk of acute MI should be very close to like this number, 0.9, a little bit better than the bare metal stents. But what do we see in our claims data set is that if we look at acute MI, you can see these two lines are very closely together in the first few days. If look at the mortality part, and this is like, it's way better than the RCT. So we were not so happily tell the world that we found something new. Instead, we went to consult the frontline physicians to ask them what do you think about this data. So they didn't expect that either, but finally we got some hint that maybe it's in Taiwan because the NHI reimburse BMS just freely, but for DES, the patient should pay out of pocket. So when patients come in the hospital with very severe, very dying situation, and then the hospital will say, let's try BMS, just for the sake of trying. So that's why we see this. That's not unexpected before we do this analysis, even with the frontline physicians, because they themselves individually they did not see this. So that on these results, the NHI then made no change decision. They just realized there's something this, and they didn't change any reimbursement decision, such things like that. But I show you a recent example. This is IO therapy registry data. This is published in a journal. There are only two tables. Table 1, the baseline characteristics. There are 1,600 patients. There will be 3 IO and some indication like melanoma to HCC. So this is table 1. And the other thing is that the analysis part. So for a melanoma, there will be 138 patients got the IO therapy medication, and HCC 408. The response rate, responses like CR, PR, stable disease, ORR, DCR, and the progression-free survival is like this. In the sake of time, for the sake of time, I would not go into this. But I just want to say, if this analysis appear on the later oral sessions, I would not give you a very high score. I only can say this, and unfortunately, based on these results, gastric cancer and HCC were dropped, delisted for IO drugs. So I think that's a very unfortunate, I say good example for this, for this talk. If we keep on this, if we as a HTA researcher, we came forward. We done this analysis, and then what happened to me as an individual 10 years later? I don't know. I don't think you can see me keep on stating on this stage. I don't know if your organization have any reputation left. I don't know if the government out of budget, if your HTA agency will be needed, still be needed, because you can always have a college student to do this kind of analysis, and your politician will very much like it. Okay? So what I can deliver is, I think, could be even more difficult to interpret. When in Taiwan situation, in the past, the company came forward with their evidence, and then we say, this evidence is not good enough. So we are a gatekeeper. When you do real-world evidence, sometimes, a lot of times the evidence is on the side of government and HTA. And then you have the accountability, responsibility on your shoulder. So what I can offer, the best suggestion is that we always remember we don't know what we don't know. So be open to what others critiques. Always prepare yourself for a mistake and welcome any comments. And or you will see me hunting on your back. Okay, but we already have very good support. That is the real life guidance. I think most of you know this guidance. This is for this region. I think it's very useful. It is very much information in that, but I would suggest you to read all this to make sure you understand every possible pitfall, every possible limitation that real-world evidence could exist. So with all this, I wish you forget the horrible image of me. Instead, I would like to wish you a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, thank you, Dr. Jasmine. Certainly there can never be any horrible image, but I think you help us peek into the future. And it's very reassuring to say it out loud. We don't know what we don't know. And at the same time, it's also good to be reminded about the fact that we shouldn't forget the method that lay the foundation as we move forward. I really appreciate the shout out to the real life guidance work. Many of the working team members are here. And there's already a question about any guideline on the use of or how to generate real world data, evidence. So please check out the real life guidance work. At the same time, we have 2 polls going on right now on HUA, and that is going to be used to guide our Q&A when we get to it in about 10 minutes. So if you haven't voted, please do go to the poll section. Last but definitely not least, our next speaker is Dr. Lalitaya Kongkham, who is the Deputy Secretary General of the National Health Security Office in charge of Thailand Public Health Insurance Scheme. She has worked to strengthen Thailand data system and the use of real-world evidence to improve planning, monitoring and evaluation, M&E, research, and broadly population health through the use of evidence. On the topic of, if we can go to her presentation, please. On the topic of real-world evidence and policy making in Thailand, please help me welcome Dr. Lalitaya.
Sawadee ka. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to share our experience with all of you. I'm quite new in HTA community, so it's my first time to join HTAsiaLink meeting. Outline of my presentation, I will divide into 3 parts. The first is overview of NHSO and UC scheme in Thailand, and how HTA introduced into our system. Later, what we learned from a COVID-19 dashboard is the real-world evidence that we use while we face with the COVID-19 pandemics. And what next, what we learned from COVID-19 and how we extend to other disease, to other evidence in UC scheme claim data. Since we achieved universal health coverage in 2002, it's 20 years, 2 decades that we achieved the UHC. And with 3 main schemes in Thailand, universal coverage scheme that NHSO responsible for more than 70% of Thai population. And HTA was introduced into 2008 for clarification of new health benefit package or change our payment methods for specific intervention to ensure that the service cover as needed. And recently, during pandemic of COVID-19, we introduced HTA Green Channel for adding COVID-19 related service into the public health insurance scheme. What we learned from COVID-19, we established the Green Channel to fast-track approval of COVID-19 services, includes screening, treatment, and inpatient, outpatient treatment, home isolation, community isolation, and then outpatient self-isolation. We rapidly adoption of the new service model, like telemedicine for home isolation and OP self-isolation. We categorize digital health with provide telemedicine, teleconsultation, telepharmacy, and other mobile health care service during pandemic. And we extend in the new normal this year and this present. The lesson learned from use real-world data to increase COVID patient access to care, for monitoring the situation and the effectiveness implementation of COVID-19 benefit package and its impacts on basic health service delivery during the pandemic. Why we developed the COVID-19 dashboard? Because during the Delta wave of the pandemic, we faced the difficulty that the patient could not get into the service because, particularly in Bangkok, because we shortage of hospital beds. There were many patients die at home, there were rumors in the social media and claim that the government covers some truth. So then the home isolation and community isolation were launched for the benefit package to ensure that we have other modalities and other service to deal with the COVID-19 patient. When we develop home isolation, we develop the home isolation platform and create interactive home isolation dashboard for monitoring patient access to care promptly and open the dashboard for the public. So the government can see the dashboard, the provider can see the dashboard, the people can see the dashboard. The home isolation monitoring dashboards is the first dashboard that we developed, and then we extend the dashboard into monitor the other dimension, like monitor the infected case, like monitor the reimbursement of our budget. The home isolation dashboard monitor along the patient pathway, so we can ensure that the patient can get the service promptly. The data is from the various sources, both internal and external agency, was combined and aggregated into personal-based data for analytics and visualization. We also exchange the data and provide the data to other agencies to make the maximum use of the data together. This is our COVID-19 reimbursement dashboard. So what we learned from the COVID-19 real-world evidence, we think how can we use our claim data to be used for to make the better effective coverage for our people. How can we tell? How can whether our data can tell us that what we are, whether it tell us that how and why it be like that. So. So we want to know that our data can use to tell what happened, why it happened, and what might be happen, and what trend to be happen in the future in terms of access, coverage, effectiveness, finance, quality. During COVID-19, we had launched new modality of service. Whether those claim data could be used for health technology assessment, whether we open our data for researchers to maximize use of it. This is our claim data. We have birth registry, death registry, claim data by DRG and fee schedule. We have some test results. We have a high-cost medicine. We have the disease management program such as renal replacement program, HIV, TB, and also we have a customer management program. But these databases are run separately. We link this data by using ID card number because every Thai people have one ID card number, so we integrate it and make it into the personal-based data. But there are many challenges in terms of our data is claim data. So there were limitations like in terms of quality and reliability of the data. We have to make the difficult task. We have to make the data integration. We have to set up the data governance system. And we have to collaborate, work with other stakeholders to ensure that our data can be work in the real world setting, can be used for effective HTA So this is our remain challenges. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lalitaya. And can I say that it already feels like Christmas when I see the phrase open data for researchers. So at this time, may I kindly ask all the panelists to join us on the stage, please. So there are questions coming in through Hoover, please. And some of them have been addressed partly already through the presentation. There was question around example of how real-world evidence can be used to answer policy questions. There's brief discussion around barrier challenges. Yeah, and there's question about guideline, how to deal with missing data, incomplete data. So I think those are things that perhaps we can use, and perhaps those can be something that you could take a peek at the guidance document. This real-life guidance work is led by NUS and HTAP with the support of HTAsiaLink. You may have heard about the update when we have the council meeting in the past year, including IDSI. Okay. All right. Oh, wow. So the poll is already up. All right. So we have one poll going, and I think it's like one of the really exciting questions. People always like debate. Would you agree? Yeah? So we have a debate going on right now. It's between RCT and RWE. So if we were to be presented with both data from randomized controlled trial and real-world evidence, what do you think would be your preference? Now, before you answer, we'll give the panelists some time because you have a lot of time to think about before you answer. So we can go to see the poll result. It's quite very close, but it seems like right now real-world evidence is taking a 2% leading point. So in politics, that means pretty much nothing. But so would anyone like to continue further to this discussion? So there are opposite results between real-world data, real-world evidence, and RCT. If we just look back not long ago, during the pandemic, there are a lot of examples as well. So the room has spoken. Right now, it counts it's now 49-51. If we wait a bit longer, it likely will be 50-50. But yeah. Yeah. So would you like to go first, Benji?
So I think according to the hierarchy of evidence, the meta-analytic results from clinical trials will be more like preferable than the meta-analytic results from real-world data, and then clinical trials and real-world data. So I would prefer clinical trials.
No worry. No judging. Okay. And yes, any other thought from the panelists?
Thank you, Dr. Rudy. I think in the future, we must know about how to conduct the real-world evidence, because now in the world, we have several third party with the big data, make collaboration with head center, and the data is very big, and it's depend on the objective of the study for regulatory or for payer or for pharma and for a patient. It's maybe we must open mind to look at the data, because the limitation of RCT, I have several experience with this. Maybe for rare disease, the number of subjects is only limited. It's not sure if we go to population, the medicine work or not. And with the big data for rare disease, we can look more advanced. Thank you.
So you're saying RWE?
In
Right.
the future.
Okay. Just checking. Okay.
In the future,
Thank
we
you.
must think about this because limitation of the randomized control trial for the new one, or for example, for COVID, now we repurposing of the old medicine, but you know that in the emergency use authorization not work like we need to know that, oh, the RCT is good, but in experience, not good, okay? Not all of the new one for COVID is good. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please.
I come from payer, so I prefer real-world evidence
Yes.
because I don't need the good RCT, but cannot implement into the real setting. So I think the real-world evidence is the answer for the people. We don't have if we have a good solution, have good benefit package, but it cannot implement into the real-world setting, it's not useful. Not improve the patient quality of life. So I prefer real-world evidence.
Thank you. Can I also cite that to the news? No, I'm joking. What do you say here? This guys we will keep here. But thank you, Dr. Lalitaya. Please, Dr.
I will ask first, choose for what? So, I mean, the reason that we choose could be very important to me. I'm thinking about the payer perspective and academics perspective. From the HTA researchers' perspective, I would think this is an area that would really want to look into, where maybe it's a healthcare system problem, or the physician part, or from the patient wise. I would be more interested in the difference, and I would like to find out why, and then hand them to the payer, and have a hint for the academics. So.
Very collaborative and diplomatic answer. Thank you, Dr.
Yes,
Jasmine. So I'm going to turn to the room to see if there's anyone who would like to make a case to your answer or against the other side as well. Anyone? Yes, please.
Good morning. My name is Amalin Takinstian from MUHTA program, Mahidol University. I would like to share for these questions. I would think it depends on the quality of real-world evidences. Now, if we could see that those real-world evidences from good quality of real-world data, and they can emulate clinical trial based on good methodology, so that that should be able to be good evidences as well. And in the meantime, we can do meta-analysis of real-world evidence based on good quality. And in the near future, that meta-analysis of real-world evidence will coming soon. So it should be able to as good as evidence from randomized control trial. So as we knew that performing randomized control trial is the best, but sometimes it's not the best for some situation. So I think that we should try to emulate randomized control trial based on real-world data. And that real-world data, the quality that we have to concern, how to identify the cohort, how to link the data, how to standardize the data, and how to analyze the data. So that is the most important. So I prefer both. Now, if I have big budget, I do randomized control trial. Now, with good resource persons and can conduct randomized control trial. But if I have no budget, no grant, so Yeah, they are. Huge data for real-world data, routine clinical practice data. So why not? So come on, now build up good quality data and try to emulate randomized control trial for some questions, and that is the real practice data in your setting. Thank you.
Thank you. Certainly that deserves an applause, certainly a call to action for a lot of us. Dr. Olivia, please.
Hi, my name is Olivia Wu. I'm Professor of Health Economics from the University of Glasgow. As somebody who does a lot of work in both trials and real-world data, I find that question really unfair, that you have to pick one. One of my additional role is to chair a large funding panel for the National Institute of Health Research in the UK. And I think the future for answering comparative effectiveness question is actually very, very promising and very encouraging, because we're now going into an era where we are actually blending the two approaches together. So we're doing adaptive trials. We're doing trial in the real-world data, in the real-world setting. We're doing trials using real-world data for longer-term follow-up, or we're randomizing in the real world. So I think, I would like to think that the future is not for us to make one better than the other, or so that we can make a choice between the two, but to efficiently merge the two together.
Thank you. Yes. Yes, certainly. And I think the question was meant to generate discussions such as this, to also align with the theme of HTA. The question at the end is not to pick one or the other. I think COVID taught us many things. Many people may have heard me say this, but one of the hashtags that become very popular is hashtag stronger together. So I think each type of evidence has a role to support the decision-making process as well. Okay. So perhaps, given the time we have, we'll move on to the second poll that we have going on, and it is about the data. Now, I'm not sure you have heard, but I think on around middle of November, we actually, a new unit of measurement was announced. Because now there was so much data in the world, they need to create a new unit of measurement. It's called QUETA, Q-U-E-T-T-A. You can search. I asked Dr. Google this morning. And so QUETA now has 30 zeros. So what does it mean? It means data are now not in shortage. We have so much data. So the next question that we ask you is really, when you think about real-world data, quality of data versus quantity of data. And perhaps I could share this. Recognizing that our new friend, AI, they feed on data. They need the data in order to get better. So the people have spoken. Quality of data set seem to be preferred than the quantity of data set. Okay? So maybe I'll first go back to the panelists to see, can you share your thought in your line of work? Even as a policymakers, if you need to pick between quality but on a subset of the population versus big data set, but real world is messy, right? So what would you pick? Or as a researcher as well, what would you pick to put in your model? Quality of data versus quantity of data?
Okay, thank you. I choose quantity and quality because from quality, we have the several database and we must select the good database. Okay, and we cannot work with only not big quantity of the data, because we need the wide range of the population, wide range of variable that we can measure, and wide range of data capture. This is the important. So I choose quality and quantity. And now, why quantity is good too? Because we need the multi-source of the data, and we we must make collaboration with the expertise that can extract and analyze with the good maybe in the management of internet, IT and clinical expertise and epidemiologists, and this is the good. And you look at to improve the methodology, we need the biostatistician that improve how the good analyze and improve the new analyze because we must analyze with the good method. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. For the remaining panelists, may I first see who would pick quality? Oh, okay. But when you put it this much, does it mean 50% quality?
I think your specialty is pick the tough questions.
No, this is from the people. I'm here just be the one who relay the message.
Yeah, I'm really thinking about in my own perspective and experiences. I'm thinking about the budgets and the quality and the quantity and good understanding of the context. And so, for trained as epidemiologist, we're trying to, we're supposed to be good at study design. So when I would rather in the front to have, to maximize the outcome that we can gather. And in the meantime, the smallest resource used, the better. So when you ask me this or that, I could not answer, so it's like this.
Thank you. Dr. Venjie?
Yeah, I think from a practical point of view, quality is very important because if the data has a lot of missing values or errors, it's equal to missing. So it's equal to not useful. So I would say quality is highly important because it forms the basics of real-world evidence. And building upon the quality, the breadth of the data set, it can be obtained from only 300 people, but 300 people each contribute to 300 variables. That is a quantity too. So I think it's important to keep the to control for the quality of the data, and starting from there to expand the quantity. Yeah.
Yes. For I'm the only one from payer.
Yes, you are. Yes.
So I prefer quantity. Yes, because in HSO and we have EKM database for 20 years. So we believe that our data are big data. And I would like to invite the researcher to explore our data because we believe that the many of data, the big data, and after we cleansing and validate the quality, it can be used for the researcher to run a study. So I believe in the quantity.
Thank you. Now we all know all the panelists' answer. Shall we also let the panelists know your answer? May I ask by the show of hand, how many people say quality? Okay. How many people said quantity? All right. How many people are looking at your phone and cannot put your hand up? No. All right. So this is just the beginning. Now we know real-world data are massive. We hope you know the context that we will never be able to finish the discussion. We could have a 1 day long or even 1 week long discussion. But we really hope that this question can generate further discussion. The speakers are still here throughout the day. If you have additional questions, please feel free to approach. And now you know who put up the hand for quality and who put up the hand for quantity. no fighting, but perhaps continue the discussion afterward. And on behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to say thank you to, on behalf of the organizing committee, maybe we can continue the discussion after, during the break as well, which will start shortly. So on behalf of the organizing committee, please help me thank the panelists. And also on behalf of the plenary, we would like to say thank you to all of you for being here first thing in the morning, starting the day together. And remember, whatever we're doing in HTA, let's keep calm and keep it real. Thank you.